Now, have you ever imagined a world where Africa was not just 54 separate countries, but one powerful united nation? One flag, one president, one currency, and also, one army. A supercontinent rising with unmatched strength, resources, and also influence. It sounds like a fantasy, okay? But what if it was not fantasy? What if it was reality? Today I'm going to be exploring a very bold question. What would really happen if all African countries united into one mega country? From military power, economic dominance, and also cultural diversity, to the challenges of leadership and also language. This is a story you don't want to miss. My name is Dedan, and this is Dedan Vlogs. If you're new here, please, you're welcome. Subscribe and also join the journey as we uncover stories that challenge what you think you know about Africa. So let's travel into the future and imagine an Africa united. Now, long before social media and also hashtags and summits, there was an African leader and also African leaders who had a vision. A single, powerful Africa that would never be colonized again. A continent that would no longer beg for aid, but give hope to the world. Now, in the 1960s there, Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, passionately believed that Africa needed political unity to survive. He said, Africa must shine, unite, or perish. Others like Muammar Gaddafi dreamed of a United States of Africa with one government and also a central bank. Now, even today, the African Union, with its 55 member states, tries to bring countries together. But politics, personal interests, and also decades of colonial damage have made unity very, very, very difficult. Still, the dream lives on, okay? Now let's imagine it's finally happened. Africa has become one united country. What would that actually look like? Now, in this new united Africa, there is no Nigeria, there is no Kenya, there is no Uganda, there is no Morocco, there is, nothing. Instead, we have one national government with a president elected by the entire continent. But here is the first challenge, okay? Who becomes the president? Do we rotate leadership between regions? Okay, do we elect one based on population size, like Nigeria or Ethiopia? How do we prevent dictatorship or power struggles in a land that is already faced political tension? Now, then there is also a capital city. Would it be Addis Ababa, already a home to the African Union, or a new city built from scratch like Egypt's new administration capital? Because to govern 1.5 billion people, we would need a very strong constitution, fair representation, and also equal power sharing. The risks of corruption, tribalism, and also inequality would still be real, but the potential would be very historic. Now, in 2025 this year, Africa's population is over 1.5 billion. And actually, it is very growing very fast. So by 2050, it will double, making Africa the youngest and most energetic population on Earth. Imagine the possibilities. Millions of young tech-savvy entrepreneurs, a labor force stronger than China or India. We have a massive consumer market. Right now, African countries are divided by visa restrictions, trade barriers, and also politics. But if united, this population becomes a weapon of strength, a country of youthful innovation, mobile banking startups, and also the world's next generation of scientists, artists, and also engineers. A united Africa could, shape global culture, science, and also businesses like never before. Now, let me ask you a question. What happens when Africa combines its military forces? How would the world react if Africa took full control of its oil, diamonds, cobalt, and gold? And could a single African currency change the global financial system forever? Now, I want you to imagine this. In Africa united today, it would instantly become one of the most military powerful nations on earth. Okay, let's break it down. Across the continent, African countries have been building serious defense forces. The top 5 African militaries today, so far we have Egypt, which has over 500,000 active personnel, advanced jets, submarines and also tanks. Then we have Algeria, boasting North Africa's second largest army and also cutting-edge missile systems. Then we have Nigeria with over 200,000 soldiers and also growing cyber warfare units. We have South Africa, known for its elite special forces and also indigenous defense industries. And also Morocco, with a powerful mix of land air forces and also cross ties to NATO. Now imagine combining all of this. The result would be a total military personnel count of well over 2.5 million active and also reserve troops. We would have thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, aircraft, warships, and also drones. A diverse range of combat experience, from counter-terrorism in the Sahel to peacekeeping in Sudan and also Democratic Republic of the Congo. And most importantly, a continental command center, that can defend Africa's borders, protect its people, and finally say never again to foreign invasions, coups backed by outside powers, or the exploitation of weak states. But military power is not just about guns. I want you to know that. A united Africa could invest in 1, space and satellite defense, and 2, maybe cybersecurity programs, and 3, the drone warfare technologies, and also even join or challenge NATO, the European Union Defense Pact, or maybe the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So no longer would Africa be a pawn in global wars, it would be a strategic player with its own military alliances, its own interests, and also its own red lines. Now, let's talk about the real power of a united Africa, which is its natural resources. Africa is the richest continent on earth in terms of raw materials, yet also the poorest GDP per capita. Why? Because for centuries, its resources have been extracted and also exported often by outsiders and rarely refined or processed on African soil. But if Africa united, everything would change. Let's look at the facts. Africa holds 90% of the world's platinum reserves. These are used in vehicles, electronics, and also even space technology. Nearly 40% of the world's gold comes from Africa, South Africa, Ghana, Mali, Sudan. And 60% of the world's cobalt, vital for electric cars and also batteries, comes from the DRC. Oil giants like Nigeria, Angola, Libya, and also Algeria pump out millions of barrels a day. Diamonds, uranium, oil, lithium, copper, the list goes on and on. Right now, these resources are mostly controlled by foreign companies backed by international powers. But in a united Africa, they would be owned, managed, and sold by African itself. Serve African people first. That means continental wealth funds like what Norway or the United Arab Emirates have. In-house refining and also manufacturing, that is to create African-made electronics, cars, and also machines. And then stronger trade deals negotiated as one bloc, not as a weak individual country. And also no more foreign military bases protecting extraction sites. So Africa could, finally stop exporting raw materials and start exporting finished products, shifting from a resource economy to a value economy. And with over $3 trillion worth of untapped minerals, a united Africa could soon become richer than Europe. But to manage that wisely, Africa would need another powerful tool, which is one market. Now, I want to imagine walking into a shop in Uganda, paying with the same currency in Morocco, Ghana, and also South Africa. No need to change shillings to francs or naira to dollars. No foreign exchange losses, no inflation chaos, no currency wars. One currency, one powerful African central bank, one continental financial system. Just like Ethiopia did with the euro, Africa could adopt its own currency, call it Afro, maybe call it the Pamoja, maybe you can call it the Ubuntu, something symbolic, uniting, and trusted. But why does this matter? Right now, most African countries rely on the US dollar or euro for trade. borrow from the IMF or World Bank, institutions with strings attached, face high inflation and also weak currencies that hurt local economies. So, but with one stable African currency, trade across Africa becomes seamless. Investment becomes easy and very safer. Foreign businesses take the continent more seriously, and also small traders, they benefit from stable prices and also larger markets. And here's the big picture. A united African economy would combine a $3.4 trillion GDP as of 2025 and a single currency and become the largest free trade area in the world with over 15 billion people. Now imagine a Nigerian company, for example, opening branches in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tunisia, no customs, no currency, no visa hurdles. A Ugandan farm exporting avocados to Egypt, processed in South Africa, shipped from Mombasa, all within one market. This is not fiction, okay? It is exactly what the African Continental Free Trade Area has started building. But if Africa truly united, then this wouldn't be a dream. It would be the default. Now, let's face one of the biggest challenges of uniting Africa, which is culture. Africa is not just one continent. I want you to know this. It is a universe of identities. There are over 2,000 languages, thousands of ethnic groups, and countless religions, customs, foods, belief systems, and also even ways of dressing. From the Swahili coast to the Baba deserts, from the Maasai plains to the Ashanti forests, the richest. That richness is breathtaking, right? But it is also very difficult to manage under one government. So the question is, how do you unite the people so beautifully diverse without erasing anyone's identity? Now, if the United States of Africa were formed today, it would face a very tough choice. Which language would represent this new nation? Let me give you a few options. English, okay, that's widely spoken across Africa, but it is also seen as colonial. Look at French, spoken in West and Central Africa, but again, it is also colonial. Look at Arabic, it is common in the North Africa, but this is less so in sub-Saharan regions. Swahili, yes, that's a very strong candidate. It is homegrown, it is Pan-African, already promoted by the African Union. Or we can probably have a new invented African language, for example, like a fusion of existing tongues, ambitious but risky also. So the most likely scenario would be multilingualism. One official working language like Swahili or English for governance, then regional languages respected for education, media, and also local politics. And most importantly, indigenous languages protected, taught, and also celebrated. So Africa would need massive investment in translation technology, language education, and also cross-cultural communication training. Unity without losing identity, that would be the real goal. Now, the other elephant in the room is tribalism. Because across history, Africa has suffered from divisions not just between countries, but within them, often manipulated by colonial powers who divided to rule. In a united Africa, internal unity becomes even more important. Muslims and Christians, pastoralists and farmers, Francophones and Anglophones, rural versus urban, north versus south, a successful united Africa would require one, decentralized governance, where the regions maintain control over local matters. Two, strong anti-discrimination laws protecting all tribes and ethnicities, and also cultural preservation programs celebrating each group's music, dress, dance, and traditions. Imagine an annual United Africa Culture Festival, a mega event where every tribe, language, and culture is represented broadcast globally. The kind of visibility would make Africa the most culturally influential force on earth. But while internal unity is the goal, what about the outside world? Let's now shift to something even more interesting. I want you to make no mistake. If Africa united, the world would shake. Yes. Let's start with the obvious, the West world panic. Why? Because for centuries, Western powers have maintained influence by dealing with Africa as many weak nations, not as a very strong voice. So a united Africa would mean one, no more unfair trade deals, no more foreign military bases, and no more quiet resource extraction deals with corrupt leaders. So countries like the US, the UK, and France, who once ruled Africa, would now have to negotiate, not to dominate. And imagine the United Nations. Right now, Africa has no permanent seat on the Security Council, but a United Africa with 1.5 billion people, global resources, and military power, it would demand and deserve a permanent seat, changing the balance of forever. Now let's talk about China. I know you're wondering, why am I talking about China? Let me tell you. China has invested billions of dollars in Africa through infrastructure projects, roads, railways, ports, and digital tech. Often with controversial, date terms. So if Africa united, it would no longer be a client, okay? It would be a partner. Africa would renegotiate loan repayments, take contracts, mining rights also, ownership of infrastructure. And what about the United States? They have always positioned themselves as a support of democracy in Africa, but would they support a united Africa if that Africa really challenged the US economic control? It is very hard to say. But one thing is very certain: Africa would stop being a geopolitical playground and also start being a player at the table. This is what we call the new global order. Imagine this: the United States of America, the European Union, China, and India. Okay, these would be the 5 global giants shaping the world economy, climate policy, space exploration, defense, and diplomacy. So Africa would bring something no other player has. For example, Africa would have youth, would have resources, and also room to grow the future. So the 21st century wouldn't be the American century, it would be the African century. But the question is, can this dream really happen? Let's get back to reality now. Is a united Africa even possible? The honest answer is not today, but maybe someday, okay? These are real obstacles. We have leadership corruption. We have ethnic tensions. We have language barriers. We have poor infrastructures. We have deep colonial scars and also this external interference. But we also have movements. For example, the African Union is already in place. Regional blocs like ECOWAS, SADC, East African Community. These ones are very strengthening cross-border cooperation. And young people like you watching me right now, you're now connected, you're more informed and more visionary than even before. So unity does not have to happen all at once, okay? It can begin in steps. Unified education, standards, joint military exercises, shared tech and innovation zones, borderless travel, a single African digital currency, stronger African media, telling our own stories, not depending on CNN or BBC. Africa does not need to copy Europe or the West. Africa can create its own unique model of unity, one that protects diversity, promotes justice, and also unlocks the future. So, now can I ask you, what kind of Africa do you want to leave behind? One divided by flags or one united by a shared destiny? It's not just about presidents and parliaments, no. It's about people, 1.5 billion of them choosing to dream bigger, work together, and also rise stronger. The world is watching, but more importantly, we are watching ourselves. A united Africa is not a fantasy. It is a possibility if we want it enough and work for it long enough. Hey, this is Dedan, and you've been watching Dedan Vlogs. If this episode challenged your mind, inspired your heart, and gave you a new